What's up, Jackwagons? Yes, I am starting a new What If. No, I'm not going to ditch the other What If of My Hero Academia. I'm doing this one specifically because I need to get more used to actually telling stories, and I'm not good at telling stories if I don't already have a good grasp on what the whole premise of said story is, or what a good grasp of what the characters are. I mean, I have a good grasp of the characterizations of the My Hero Academia characters, just not a good characterization of how to go about telling the story. But luckily, with this What If I'm going to tell, I do. So think of it more along the lines of merging the My Hero Academia universe with another universe. That universe being a universe I made up. Yes, I'm basically putting one of my series into the My Hero Academia world, but but with a good purpose. Anyway, let's start by telling how the world of the My Hero Academia universe is now. So, for starters, when the quirks first appeared, well, actually, first let me start off by telling about the mysterious superheroes that appeared one day over about, let's say, 4 centuries ago. Those heroes were known to look rather odd for humans. They were human, but they were rather tall for their height. I mean, tall for their species. They all had different colored skin besides regular coloring of skin. Like one guy had blue skin, and he was the leader. And they all had either wings, tail, horns, or all three sometimes. Most of the time they only had the horns and the tail, or ears in place of the horns. And they all had powers, and they were all considered as the world's protectors, the world's guardians, if you will. Unbeknownst to them how powerful they actually were. Not long after quirks started appearing. These quirks were giving people strange abilities and powers. At first, people thought that's the way that these people had gotten their powers, but soon after they ditched that idea because these people didn't have any limits to what they could do with their powers. And for one, they also mysteriously stopped doing their job for a while, but then they came back, like a century later, and none of them looked any different. Turns out these guys don't age, so not only were they did they have powers, but their abilities, or maybe something else, stopped them from aging, meaning that they were all the exact same ages when they first got their powers. Now, of course, the government tried to get a handle on quirks, and even these mysterious heroes that had been around for so long. It worked for the quirks, not for these heroes, because unlike the people with quirks, these guys didn't have limitations, and they had already proven more times back when they were, the protectors of the world, that they were pretty much they didn't report to anybody but themselves. But that was good because they were also good people. They never tried to cause problems. They never caused any mischief. And eventually, people wanted to ask why this was. They had this power. They didn't have limitations like the people with quirks did. And finally, their leader came out and gave the answer. The leader of this team of heroes, or as he called it, his army, was known. He told them that he was the guardian of all of reality. And while he was capable of doing things that shouldn't be possible for someone his age, even though he technically had a lot of experience. He's 18, by the way. He was chosen to be the guardian of all that exists. It was his responsibility to make sure things kept in the balance, and make sure that things didn't cause instabilities in reality. And he did a pretty good job of this. One of the things he didn't like about his job, though, was that it was his responsibility to erase or destroy corrupted multiverses. This is multiverses that were similar to the ones that we live in now, but that were too corrupted to be saved. However, he would make sure that if there was any amount of good in this multiverse, he would make sure to get them get them and bring them to the multiverse they live in now. Because it wouldn't be much different other than the fact that people are genuinely good here. For the most part, it's better living conditions than what they were in. Anyway, so this person, he told them that because of this power, and because of what his job was, the number one rule with their powers was they had a connection to to the actual manifestation that kept all of reality, that was responsible for creating all of reality. That was called the omniforce. The omniforce gifts people with powers that it deems worthy, and by worthy it means they have to be good people, and they have to have the sole want to protect the ones they care about. But they can't just want to have power just because they want to be powerful. They have to have a reasoning, and it has to be a good reasoning for them to want power. For instance, say someone's, I don't know, belittles others because they have a weaker power than they do. Katsuki Bakugo. Anyway, this hero, or this guardian, was known by one name and one name only. And please don't get mad at me for what I'm about to say. This hero was the self-proclaimed guardian of reality, Speed Fury. Yes, I know this is pretty much the character that my profile is named after, but I know my characters in my series better than anything else. So I've got a and I know how to write the story with these guys. So anyway, moving on. Speed Fury, while his name did have the word speed in it, that was only a name that was given, that he chose to throw people off of what his powers truly were, and that was energy manipulation or reality warping. Basically, anything that has energy in it, which is literally everything, he could manipulate it. He could bring people back to life. He could stop people from dying. He could, because of what his powers were, he could cure even viruses or diseases that could have killed countless amounts of people. But he never let any of that power go to his head, because he knew if it did, then he would lose his powers. And he felt a great responsibility, even at the young age that he was given those powers at 18. Now, of course, this means that he no longer has the rest of his original family to live alongside, except for the few members of his family that were actually chosen as worthy. Well, except for his little brother, who now uses the power of the Nega Omniforce, which is basically the opposite of the regular Omniforce, but they need to both exist in order for one, because one can't survive without the other. Anyway, Speed Fury, or Speed as the rest of his team called him, was very serious at times, but he also had a bit of an attitude problem, mainly towards people who were either stupid, were full of themselves, or didn't know what it meant to be truly heroic. To him, the only person that was worthy of being called a hero out of all the people that had quirks at the moment was the new hero that recently popped up, All Might. He was the only person that Speed Fury saw as a true hero at this point in time. In fact, he reminded him of his clone of Speed. All Might did. One of his clones that he had made of himself. Yes, he's done that. And this clone's name was Axel. This clone was actually looked very similar to All Might, besides the fact that he didn't have the same color of hair, and he also happened to just be a little bit on the younger side. Also had, long spiky hair and looked more like him than All Might. Just like he had like a similar personality to All Might. Anyway, so over time, Speed Fury figured, All Might can handle this for now. I've got more pressing matters to worry about, like making sure reality keeps in check. And while he's doing this, he every now and then he'll tune into the news to see what All Might's been doing, to make sure he's been doing a good job, but he doesn't doubt that he is. But he notices that All Might seems to not be showing up as often. This is quite a few years later. And he notices that he's also seeming to slow down a bit. And while other people haven't noticed it, Speed Fury has noticed that he seems to be struggling to hold on to his form for a while. This has resulted in Speed Fury wanting to get into contact with All Might. And when he does, All Might is shocked, because he knows that while he is the number one hero, Speed Fury is way stronger than anything he could hope to achieve. So All Might gladly accepts, and Speed Fury finally gets in contact with him, and they decide to meet up. Speed Fury creates a portal and has All Might come to his base in America. Yes, Speed Fury lives in America, because he's me. Well, an alternate version of me, not exactly me. Anyway, All Might, wondering what was going on, in his muscle form, asks, what can I do for you, Speed Fury? Speed Fury simply says, I know you're struggling to hold that form. You can cut the crap. All Might was shocked at first, but then immediately lets go of the form, reverting back into his small size. Speed Fury, looking down at the new shriveled up All Might, says, how long have you had that injury? All Might simply says, a while now. I can't hold that muscle form for more than 3 hours a day. And I'm worried that I won't be able to be the symbol of peace for much longer. Speed Fury puts his hand out and heals All Might's wound. But how? Nobody's been able to do that. Speed Fury says, I'm literally a guy that can kill gods and have erased multiple different multiverses. I can heal wounds. But I also looked into your quirk to see what it is. So you were quirkless before that was passed down to you, huh? All Might was shocked at this before realizing that there wasn't really that big of a deal to worry about. Speed Fury was good at keeping secrets. Or at least as far as he knew. He didn't really know the guy that much. Look, All Might, even if I've healed you now, and you're back to your prime, you aren't going to be able to be the symbol of peace forever. You're going to have to find a successor sooner or later. And while I would love to get back into the field to protect people, I've still got other important things to do. All Might, of course, was hesitant at first, but finally said, I've tried, but there's not really anyone out there who's worthy of becoming a successor to me. At least not yet. And then Speed Fury says, well, when that's where I come in. I'm going to help you find a successor. My team hasn't done this in a while, but we're going to see if there's anybody out there who's truly worthy of being able to wield the omniforce again. This means that our army will be getting a lot bigger, but it also means that we're gonna have to train the new meat, so to speak. I've been thinking about this new generation. I wonder if they'll actually provide any generally good-hearted people. We'll have to see. I've already sent one of my agents, or one of my teammates, to go pose as a doctor who not only analyzes quirks to check and see what their quirks are, but also see if they're worthy of wielding the Omniforce and see if they have even a minor connection to it. I'll notify you once we have somebody. As for now, keep being the symbol of peace and do your job. Make sure that people feel safe. All Might nodded, and Speed Fury opened a portal so All Might could go back to Japan. Before All Might left, Speed Fury simply said, oh, also, love the use of you using the parts of America as your attacks. It's pretty funny. Anyway, see ya. A few years pass, and Speed Fury has been in contact with the person he had sent to act as a quirk doctor. He had actually sent several out, and one of them the one he had sent to Japan, was somebody from his team. His army is split into teams, and his team is known as the Alpha Masters, so he sent the smartest member of his team out to Japan to go act as the quirk doctor over there. Now, of course, what's going to happen with Dr. Garaki? Well, Dr. Garaki isn't there at that place anymore because of the fact that, well, a little bit worried with the fact that a world destroying guy who's super smart and also happens to be able to manipulate technology happens to be posing as the quirk doctor for all of Japan, and he's pretty dang good at it. Anyway, we're moving on to a new point of view now. This point of view is from the quirk doctor himself. This quirk doctor is one of the heroes, which nobody knows their name anymore, but of course he does. The Gladiator Masters. Why did they choose this name? Well, because the original person to give Speed Fury his powers was his grandfather, Speed Fury's grandfather, and his armor looked very similar to a gladiator. So why not just name it that? Not a very creative name, but it was catchy. This is Technoblast, the smartest member of Speed Fury's team. He's not the smartest Gladiator Master, but he is still the smartest of his team, and is the second best when it comes to building and everything like that. So not only is he smart enough to build inventions, but he's also smart enough to have several PhDs. Anyway, Techno was busy working with his stuff, and most people who knew enough about the Gladiator Masters knew that Techno was, well, an omniforce user, but others just figured that he had some kind of techno quirk of some kind. Pardon my pun. Anyway, he notices that a mother and her child come in, and they both had green hair. The little kid was very wild, but had a very, very happy smile on his face. Techno simply smiled, said, and thought to himself, kid must be excited to get his quirk. So he met up with the mother and son, and the kid wanted to know what his quirk was. So Techno took him back into the room and ran several tests. Unlike Dr. Garaki, Techno's got a lot more technology, and was able to fashion a device that was able to specifically search for the quirk gene in anybody. And when he searched Izuku, at first his frown fell. At first his smile fell because Izuku didn't have a quirk. And Techno simply thought to himself, "Oh boy, this kid's not going to enjoy the fact that he's quirkless." But he then began to scan him again to see if he had any amount of an omniforce connection. And to his shock, he did. This kid must have been so pure, even at a young age, or so heroic that he was able to have even a small connection to it. So Izuku went back to his mother, and Techno came out a short while later. And of course he had a sorrowful look on his face for the fact that Izuku didn't have a quirk, but he was still happy that he was able to have a connection to the Omniforce. And he came out and first off said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Midoriya, but your son does not have a quirk. He is quirkless." And of course, Izuku and his mother get shocked by this, and Izuku drops his All Might toy, which then Techno's arm shoots out, grabs the toy, and gives it back to Izuku. Because as you can see, if you can, his arm isn't connected to his elbow, his forearm. Neither is his leg. That's specifically so that he has more range with fighting. And then after handing it back to Izuku, I said, "Now hold on, kid. I said you are quirkless. I didn't say you didn't have a chance to be a hero. Even without a quirk, you could still be one. I don't know what's with people nowadays thinking you have to have a quirk to be a hero. Because I've seen several people back when I was younger, back when I first started this job, and they were all heroes, and they had no powers whatsoever. But regardless, your son has a connection to the Omniforce." Inko was shocked at this, not realizing that anyone having a connection to the Omniforce nowadays was even possible. Yes, she knows what the Omniforce is. Everybody does at this point. But for the most part, people don't talk about it because of the fact that nobody now has been able to actually use Omniforce powers. The reasoning that no one's been able to use powers nowadays, this is Techno speaking now, is because of one small factor. While some people may have a small connection, it's not enough for them to become, well, like us. For one, the only two out of all of us that were able to get our powers without having them unlocked for us was the leader of the Mega Masters, Rainbow Shock, and Speed Fury. Speed Fury was given his powers directly from his grandfather, and the same goes with Rainbow Shock. Speed Fury wasn't even the first of us to get his powers. He was the second. Rainbow Shock was just the one who was put in charge of finding him first. Then shenanigans happened after all that. We'll get into that later. Anyway, your kid is very much able to use the Omniforce, but he needs to have it unlocked first. Which is why, with your permission, I would like to bring him to the Gladiator Masters base to teach him how to to unlock those powers for him and teach him how to use them, as well as teach him how to speak English, because, I'm speaking Japanese to you right now, but he doesn't know it, and you clearly don't either. English, I mean. And yes, Techno would know how to speak English because he is super smart, so he figured out a way to just give him the ability to be bilingual or multilingual. It took a little bit of convincing for Inko Midoriya to let her son go to the Gladiator Masters base, but she said on one condition. She wants to wait a few more days to think about it first. Techno agrees to this, saying that it's understandable that she would want to think before sending her son to an entirely different country to a bunch of people she doesn't know. And so, They waited a day or a few days, and Izuku went to school the next day, where things happened. Let's just say when the rest of the people in Izuku's daycare found out he was quirkless, they started bullying him, all except one, his best friend from childhood, Katsumi Bakugo. And yes, I'm turning Bakugo into a girl for this story. Why am I turning Bakugo into a girl? Well, because I made an omniforce form for her too, and I didn't think that Bakugo as a guy, with the way he is in the main story, would be worthy of it. And I wanted at least all of Class 1A, or at least most of Class 1A, to be able to use the omniforce in some way or another. And since women are, well, at least women from my time, when I was in high school, were more compassionate, and I had a lot of friends that were female growing up, and were a lot more kind than guys were, I figured that works better. Anyway, so Katsumi starts defending Izuku, saying that it doesn't matter if he has a quirk, he can still be a hero. And also brought up the fact that they had seen several movies where there were several quirkless heroes being heroes. Of course, most of the students didn't believe this, but this also grabbed the attention of somebody who was walking nearby. This person who had been walking could feel the Omniforce flowing through both Katsumi and Izuku. And now, this person was a member of the Gladiator Masters, and already was very much aware that Izuku was had the Omniforce connection within him. But Katsumi had it too, even if it was smaller than Izuku's, because she was a bit more aggressive than Izuku was. And upon noticing this, the woman, yes, it was a woman who was watching, began to watch from a distance, just to see how things would play out. Eventually, the kids left Izuku alone, and Katsumi and Izuku began playing together again. The woman, who had a pale white skin and blue hair, simply smiled before saying, "It's nice to see that there are other kids who have a chance of being like us." Later, in the base, the woman had reported in from Japan through a portal, coming back to the Gladiator Master base and screaming for Speed Fury's attention. "Stop screaming, Torch! I'm literally right over here," said Speed Fury. He was literally just sitting on the couch next to his girlfriend, Rainbow Shock. And then, so Torch ran over to Speed Fury. She then began excitedly telling him that she had found a child who was worthy of wielding the Omniforce besides the one they had discovered earlier, who also was in Japan, saying that the child had ash blonde, spiky, medium-length hair, and was a bit more aggressive than her friend, than the kid Izuku was, but she was still definitely worthy of it. Now, Torch was also Japanese, so she spent a lot of her time still in Japan. She could come back to the base at any time, and as she was part of the Alpha Masters. But being as Torch was the only member of the Gladiator Masters who was actually Japanese, it was lucky that she happened to just walk by when she did. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to actually understand what they were saying. I mean, several of the other Gladiator Masters could easily find a way to be able to learn to speak Japanese, but Torch already knew how to speak it right off the bat. So, Speed Fury eventually got intrigued by this and asked, "So, do you know what the kid's name is?" Torch simply replied with Katsumi Bakugo, which then resulted in her best friend. One second. Anyway, this resulted in her best friend coming to tease her over if she was stalking a bunch of children. Of course, Torch denied this, and Spray, one of the other Alpha Masters, got after her for, well, teasing. One second. And this is a relatively new character for me, and I'm still getting used to remembering her name. I've created a bunch of these characters. Anyway, she's not a member of the Gladiator Masters, but she is a creature that has the Omniforce flowing through her. So I'm sorry if I forgot her name. It'll come back to me eventually. I'll have to look it up back on Reddit where I have all my other Gladiator Master stuff posted. Anyway, she's what's known as a war demon, and her whole thing is that her species thing is that they like fighting. There are a few special cases where it's rare for for a war demon to not want to fight as much, and she's one of those rare cases where she's more interested in making swords and watching anime. So yeah, she's a weeb. That's why she's the best friend of Torch. Anyway, Spray teases her, telling or gets after her, telling her to stop teasing her best friend, and Speed Fury looks into both Katsumi and Izuku and finds out that they're both best friends. This is interesting. I guess we have two newbies to start out with. Speed Fury then would turn to Torch and ask one simple question. Torch, I want you to go back to Japan and see if there are any other kids that are worthy of using the Omniforce. I know that it's highly unlikely that there are other children with that ability, but if you do find any more, notify me immediately. Torch saluted and would head back to Japan via portal, and kept an eye on the two kids, as well as looking for other children who may have an Omniforce connection. Most of the Alpha Masters were able to just sense the Omniforce connection without using Techno's Omniforce connection finder. Yes, that was the name he gave it, and a lot of people often told him how terrible of a name it was, especially his best friend Strike. But he said, "I don't care if it's a bad name. I used to be a rodeo boy. Don't mess with me." Of course, this was a terrible argument, but nobody really tried to correct him. A couple days later, Izuku's mother finally came to a decision, and she decided that she will allow Izuku to go to the Gladiator Masters. But unbeknownst to her, the same had happened with Katsumi, and she was going to go and train with the Gladiator Masters as well. Upon arrival via portal, Izuku was astounded to see how much taller all of the Gladiator Masters were compared to even All Might. They were very tall. Speed Fury himself was like 10 foot 8 inches. That's his actual height, by the way. He's really tall, twice my height. Yes, I have short problems. He then noticed that Katsumi was already there, and he immediately ran up to her and asked her why she was, and she simply said that she's here to train with the Gladiator Masters because they said that she has the power to do so. And Izuku said so did he. Katsumi was happy that she actually got to train with her best friend instead of having to do all this by herself. And then Speed Fury came into the room and handed both Katsumi and Izuku badges. These badges were designed to trigger the Omniforce energy flowing through anybody who had the connection. Upon receiving both badges, both Izuku and Katsumi went through a transformation. Izuku took on a new appearance. This appearance giving him large wings that were shaped like steel flames, a long tail that had a spike that also had the look of steel flames, and two horns protruding from the sides of his head. These horns were also shaped like flames. Katsumi had a similar transformation, but besides the three flame-shaped horns on the side of her head, she also had another part of the horn that stretched down and kind of bent upwards, like what's the word? Kind of like a ram's horn. The wings she sprouted looked like regular dragon wings, but they were more of a maroonish red in color. Her skin also changing to that color. And the wings also seemed to have like tears in them, but they were just part of the wing in general. Her tail also had a maroon color to it, like her skin and wings did. And she grew slightly taller until they get older. They stop aging once they reach like teenager years, specifically like around ages 15 to 18. It kind of differs depending on the Gladiator Master. Anyway, the two best friends now had transformed into Omniforce wielders. And while I don't have the pictures of them with their as Gladiator Masters, but as children, I do have their teenager appearances. So here's Izuku's. And the flaming eyes do go away. He makes them go away. And yes, that's his weapon of choice. And if you've noticed the red stuff on his body, he is going to get one for all. I'm sorry, that's a spoiler, but if I didn't tell you, you would have figured it out anyway because it's obvious. And as for Katsumi, Here's her hero suit, which I did give her a sword because all the Gladiator Masters need to have weapons besides like what they're used to, and one of her grenade gauntlets turns into like an arm cannon similar to Mega Man's Buster. Anyway, with these two having their powers, Izuku was actually given 2 abilities, and Katsumi had 1. Why did Izuku have 2 and Katsumi only had 1? Well, Izuku was quirkless, so he got 2 powers, while Katsumi got 1 power, and her explosion quirk was basically enhanced by the omniforce, making her quirk version of it kind of useless, making her omniforce version of it much more powerful. In doing so, Izuku's 2 powers were known as ultimate pyrokinesis, meaning he was now destined to be the strongest fire user in the Gladiator Masters army, and also a minor version of mind manipulation, meaning he was weaker than the only other mind manipulation user in the Gladiator Masters base, being Telekineta, the leader of the Elite Masters and the 3rd strongest member of the Gladiator Masters. As for Katsumi, her new power was Rage. Since she was already pretty aggressive as is, she was given a Rage boost on top of that. Now, Rage boosted Gladiator Masters still have full control. That's the whole thing with Gladiator Master powers, is that control is a very important aspect. So basically, Katsumi can get angry but still be in full control. As for her other power, well, explosions still. Now, they could both see each other whenever they wanted to and still hang out, they still had to be trained separately because their powers were still different. Mostly, Katsumi had to be trained with her rage powers by the 3 mentors that also used rage with their abilities. Izuku had to be trained by several fire-using mentors. Each one of these mentors were members of the Gladiator Masters that used fire-themed abilities, and there were a lot of them. Like, there were several different fire-using Gladiator Masters, and because his fire power was actually meant to be able to use all of their abilities, as well as his own. Like this green fire you see that's coming from his eyes and his sword's made out of. That's his ability, but he can use all the others' powers too. As for his mind manipulation, well, he only had 1 mentor for that because there was only 1 Gladiator Master who had that ability. That Gladiator Master was Telekineta. Now, I've brought up several other Gladiator Masters already that you probably don't even know what they look like. I've talked about Rainbow Shock. I've talked about Telekineta. I've brought up a few other characters, but I haven't really shown them off yet. We'll get to that. First off, let's talk about Telekineta, since she's the strongest of all of Izuku's mentors. This is Telekineta. She is basically the middle of the 5 strongest Gladiator Masters. She's not too powerful, but she's not too weak either. Actually, none of them are, but she's like the middle one. While she is obviously a girl, she prefers hanging out with the guys. She's pretty much a tomboy. She's also got a bit of a temper problem, but you can't really blame her considering the rest of her team is grouped of a bunch of idiotic guys who literally have 1 brain cell shared among them, except for her new second in command. I say new because her previous one was recently replaced by their newest member of the Elite Masters. The newest member is the only one of them who actually has a brain, and that's Fang. He's also one of Izuku's mentors. Now that we've gotten Telekineta out of the way, let's talk about Izuku's other mentors. First up, we have Fluminoid. Fluminoid is the only member of the Gladiator Masters to be a phoenix, or to be part phoenix, as you can tell from the flaming wings and tail he has. He's also one of the stronger fire users. Unlike the other teams, for some reason the Alpha Masters have 3 fire users on their team. And you've already seen one of them, which would be Torch. Anyway, Fluminoid he's kind of laid back, but he knows when it's time to do his job. And he's kind of like the big brother that Izuku never had. So he's going to be the one to teach Izuku the basics of what it means to control his fire. Next up, we have Torch. Torch was before Izuku came into the picture. Torch was the strongest fire user out of all the Gladiator Masters, because not only does she have the ability to access different heats, different temperatures of fire, but she also is is the only Gladiator Master to be able to transform into an entirely different species. Right now, she's just a regular fox that can use fire powers, but when she transforms into her, well, what's the creature called? Her kitsune form, her hair and tail will turn white along with her sprouting more tails, and for some reason she'll be dressed in an entirely different outfit. Nobody's really questioned that. But then again, the same thing happens with several other Gladiator Masters and their transformations. Anyway, Torch is going to be the one that teaches Izuku about controlling different levels of heat and how to manipulate that fire, as well as teach him how to even transform into her kitsune form. Next, we have Blaze. He's the oldest member of the oldest fire user in the Gladiator Masters, being older than Speed Fury, because of the fact that he's what is known as a Shadow Demon. The Shadow Demons once fought alongside the original Guardians of Reality called the Omni Giants, which is what Speed Fury is. Well, he is part Omni Giant, part human. Anyway, he is the former leader of the Shadow Armada, and now works alongside the Gladiator Masters. He himself is one as well. And there are, of course, 5 different elements in the Shadow Demons. There are fire, plants, lightning, water, and poison. Only 3 of those Shadow Demons remained loyal to what the Omni Giants fought for. The other 3 did not. Those 3 being Blaze and his 2 brothers, Overgrow and Torrent. Yes, I named them after Pokemon abilities, don't judge me. As he's the most experienced, he'll be the one to teach Izuku how to fight correctly, and also how to use Shadow Flames. Next up, we have Fang. Fang is another one of the rare Gladiator Master cases where he has 2 powers instead of 1. The reason he has 2 powers is, well, because I guess he was just given 2 powers. His first power is, of course, Pyrokinesis. His second power is Werewolf. So yeah, he can turn into a werewolf, mostly at night. At night, he's strongest, I mean. But he also figured out a way to combine his powers together to become the Fire Wolf. Now, he could easily have taught Izuku the same stuff that everybody else is going to teach him, but he's going to teach him how to use his Fire Wolf form. Because Izuku, unbeknownst to him, is going to actually be a high-ranked Gladiator Master alongside quite a few of the others. Next, we have Bonnie. Bonnie is more or less confusing. She's a bit more of a teaser than an actual fighter. She doesn't spend a lot of the time in the battlefield, but when she does, she actually does a pretty good job, despite that. But she's one of the members of the Ultimate Masters, which are the 4th strongest team in the Gladiator Masters army. She's known for using her fire in forms of dance. Basically, imagine like firebending from Avatar, and just like imagine that kind of fighting style on her. She'll be teaching Izuku how to basically dance with fire, and also fight with it. Basically, dance fighting with fire. Next, we have Flare. Flare is the fire user for the Enforcer Masters. The Enforcer Masters are the 5th strongest team, and in the top 5. Well, in the top 5 teams, I mean, not the top 5 strongest. She's the second in command of the Enforcer Masters, and has had a lot of experience with her fire. She'll be teaching Izuku how to use different weapons along with his fire, because she's also the best when it comes to using weapons. Out of the Fire Masters, I mean, because while Torch is the strongest, she doesn't use weapons. She literally just punches things, or claws them. Ignitix will be the one to be teaching Izuku how to control his new form. And by control, I mean, well, if you can't tell, he's the same thing that Izuku is, a fire dragon. And fire dragons are known to be kind of hot-headed. Not intended. In other words, they tend to get angrier than the rest of the dragon species do. And it's not as easy to control as it is with people with rage powers. But anyway, yeah, he'll be the one teaching him how to master his rage. And then finally, his last mentor, which of course is going to throw Izuku off by a ton because of the fact that she's not even human at all. The other Gladiator Masters are all human. This member of the Gladiator Masters is not. Let's just say she's from a different planet. And she's going to be teaching Izuku how to be able to resist other fire, be able to tank other hits from different kinds of fire. This will be Singe to take this role. She's part of a species of creature known as, well, I still haven't come up with an appropriate name for them yet, but they're kind of like a human and an octopus or other cephalopods mixed together. Except, more than just 8 limbs or 10 limbs or whatever. Now, what about Katsumi? What are her mentors going to be? Because, well, to be honest, to start off, there is only one Gladiator Master who has a rage-boosting ability. And his name is Ripclaw, and he's a member of the Mega Masters, which are the second strongest team in the Gladiator Masters. And while that definitely is more than enough, the thing is, Ripclaw might be strong, but him being the only rage boosting member of the Gladiator Masters team isn't enough to actually be a good teacher, because he's still a teenager. So they had to call in a little bit more help besides him. First off, let's take a look at Ripclaw. Ripclaw he has controlled rage, and he's more or less not really much of an angry person. But when he gets angry, it's not a pretty sight. But he was willing to teach Izuku, but they needed more help. And since he was the only member of the Gladiator Masters who was able to help, because he had a rage ability. Sorry, not Izuku, he's teaching Katsumi. They had to call upon a few other people. Specifically people who are not part of the Gladiator Masters, but were still close friends. And they called upon 2 of them. One of them, they were hesitant to ask because of fear that she would put a bad influence on Katsumi. This person was Violet. And it wasn't because she was like a bad person or anything, it was because of her mannerisms. And Violet wasn't exactly somebody you would want to train, well, a human. Or train a new, younger kid, especially from what the age they were going with. Let's just say Violet's not exactly someone you want to look up to. This is Violet. And Violet is what's known as an Inferno Demon. Well, half Inferno Demon. Inferno Demons, well, they look like your traditional, what you would imagine a succubus would look like, but they're in no way the same thing. Inferno Demons, they have a big connection to the omniforce. And they always wear black. They don't really have a choice in that matter. They can't even change their clothes. They're stuck in whatever clothes they came out of the cloning chamber. And yeah, they repopulate their species by cloning. Since they're all strictly female, they can't exactly repopulate any other way. I mean, unless they fall in love with another species. Which, let me talk about Violet real quick. Violet was not created the same way. Violet is a hybrid. The way to tell the difference between a full-blooded Inferno Demon and a hybrid Inferno Demon and Frigid Demon, because they have the same kind of characteristics, is the horns. If an Inferno Demon does not have their horns, that's how you know they're a hybrid. And also, Violet's wings are a dead giveaway that she's not full Inferno Demon. Inferno Demons usually have mostly all black on the outsides of their wings, with the same color as their skin on the inside. Violet is part vampire. Now, you'd think, oh, that means that she's probably going to teach Katsumi how to drink blood. No, vampires don't like humans very much because of that factor. Humans, for some reason, started spreading rumors that vampires drink blood. In this universe, vampires don't drink blood. At all. Their fangs are just a defense mechanism. As for their weaknesses, the only real one they actually have is, well, wouldn't stick to the heart, but that would literally kill anybody, as Dracula from Hotel Transylvania says. Violet also tends to be a terrible role model because she also gives people bad advice. Well, bad to everybody else. Good in her opinion because it means that she gets a good laugh out of it. But enough about the bad influence that is Violet, and let's move on to the next person that will be training Katsumi with her rage quirk, or her rage power. Now, for Katsumi's last mentor, they wanted to call upon Marigold at first, who is another member of the Inferno Demons, but Marigold's not much of a fighter, even with her rage ability. So they chose to go with somebody a bit more experienced, and who better? Well, at first they thought it was a good idea. Who better than the leader of the War Demons, Clash? Now, Clash is a bit more unlike he shares the whole. He's one of the rare cases with war demons that they're able to contain their urge for bloodlust and fighting. That's why he was chosen as leader, is because he has the ability to contain that urge. And while it may have been a good choice to pick him at first, Kalash tends to forget sometimes that he's supposed to train. So just to make sure to keep him in line, they had to call upon another demon leader. So they called on the leader of the Inferno demons, the leader who, for some reason, shockingly shares the resemblance of Speed Fury's girlfriend, which is why he doesn't like inviting her over. Luckily, she doesn't have the same personality that she does. They called upon Queen Spectra, who's only part Inferno demon and part Frigid demon, which is why her horns are different shaped. Because she's technically a full-blooded demon, she doesn't have. She still has her horns. But unlike the other Inferno demons, she has 6 abilities. As you can, well, I don't know if you can tell, but each color in her clothing, the color on the Inferno demon's clothing and in their hair, is meant to resemble what their powers are. So in Spectra's case, red for rage, orange for fire, yellow for light, green for plant, blue for electricity, and for some reason I forgot to draw the purple one right there, but purple is necromancy. So she'll be there to train both Katsumi and Izuku in both fire and rage. Because, well, she's pretty old, so she's had enough experience. Also, directly after Fang's mother passed away, when she got old enough, Spectra's pretty much just tried adopting him on the spot. And I think she succeeded. We don't know. Spectra immediately claimed Fang as her son. And nobody really complained about it, except for Fang at first. But Fang being the newest member of the Gladiator Masters as of late, they just kind of didn't really care that he didn't care. They didn't care that he cared, I mean. Anyway, with all that said and done, astounded by how many people were going to train them, both Izuku and Katsumi were a little bit worried because of how menacing some of them looked. And also, Izuku was very uncomfortable with both of the Inferno demons being there, because Spectra and Violet weren't exactly dressed modestly. And unfortunately, that's a thing with all Inferno demons. And so yeah, Izuku's gonna have to get used to that. Katsumi was fine with it, but that's because she was a girl already. So, but as they were getting ready to train, one thought went through both of their head: we're in trouble. A few years pass, and both Katsumi and Izuku have done quite a bit of training and have mastered their powers more correctly. They had visited the Gladiator Masters base and had become both very fluent in English, so they have gone back and forth, going back to and from home. They don't have to stay in the base. They're welcome to go home anytime they want. And one day in school, the teacher is telling them about they need to be concerned about their future. And while usually this would result in students getting excited, this was not the case, as most of them, even though the teacher said that he knew they all wanted to be heroes, they knew that they didn't really have a chance with the two powerhouses that were in the classroom with them, being Izuku and Katsumi having omniforce powers. Suffice to say, people were jealous of the fact that they got omniforce powers over because they were considered worthy of wielding them. And Katsumi simply shouted, "It's not our fault that you guys are pieces of crap and don't treat others with respect." And then several students would shout at Katsumi, saying she doesn't do the same with them. And then Katsumi would say, "Respect is earned, not given." Suffice to say, she learned quite a few lessons from Spectra, and with Spectra around, she didn't really get that much of a bad influence from Violet. As for the teachers, well, the teachers were too afraid of the Gladiator Masters to actually try and promote bullying in their school. With 2 Gladiator Masters, well, not full Gladiator Masters yet, but they were still pretty much had the same powers in their school, they knew that if they messed up at all, and any of the Gladiator Masters found out, they would be in so much trouble, especially if Speed Fury found out. Now, Izuku and Katsumi hadn't actually talked to Speed Fury that much, but they had heard stories from their mentors saying how powerful he was. and that while he was a very serious fighter, he was gentle towards people at times. But they told them to stay completely away from Rainbow Shock. She was a psycho. And even Speed Fury, even though they didn't see him, confirmed it from the hallway as he was doing something in somewhere else. When they heard that Rainbow was a psycho, all they heard was, "It's true! Stay away from her!" And Izuku and Katsumi had grown closer over the years. Not like romantically closer, just closer. Because they're like brother and sister now, basically. And as they were leaving school that final day, they had decided they wanted to go to UA. They didn't really have to go to UA because if they just went full on Gladiator Master, they didn't even have to obey the rules of the government, because the Gladiator Masters don't do it anyway. So, and there's nothing the government they could do about it because of how overpowered they were as is. But they began to walk home, and they decided to take a shortcut through an underpass. This would have been a bad idea if it was taking place in another universe. However, this time it wasn't. A seemingly grotesque sludge, living kind of sludge, sprouted from the sewer and tried to take over Izuku, only to be shocked when he couldn't move. Izuku was holding him there with a lime green glow surrounding him, while Katsumi was getting ready to use a rage blast, which is an ability that was taught to her by Ripclaw, as it was one of his signature moves. But before they could, All Might jumps out of the crate and was not out of the crate, out of the sewer, and is about to use his Texas Smash, only to be stopped when he sees that the two students have already got him kind of contained. And he thanks them, saying that it was great that they helped, but he apologizes for getting them caught up in this mess. Izuku was still a pretty big fanboy of heroes and asked for an autograph right off the bat. And All Might signed, no problem. All Might then paused as he noticed their rather familiar features. He then asked them, "Young students, are you, by any chance, omniforce users?" Izuku and Katsumi both said yes, and All Might said, It seems that Speed Fury found some omniforce, some kids nowadays that were worthy of using them after all," he said. Both Katsumi and Izuku were confused by this. Speed Fury planned to find them? And All Might knew about it? All Might simply shrugged this off and said, "Never you mind. But I must go. I have important things to do, and, well, I don't want to be late to them. But first I must take this villain to the prison." And yes, All Might doesn't have that time limit anymore, because remember, Speed Fury healed him already, so he actually does have something important to get to, though. But he still does transform back into his skinny form because of one thing. That's what happens when you don't eat very much, and All Might literally has had to eat fluids for most of his life, or for the time that he's been skinny. So he's still trying to get that skinny form of his back to be his real form. It eventually will. It's not as skinny as it was before. He looks like a normal dude now when he's not buffed up. But anyway, All Might heads out, and Izuku simply just begins walking back, continue walking with Katsumi. As they continue walking, they notice that there's a commotion going on, and they notice that the sludge villain has escaped from All Might. Both of them were confused as to how, because it shouldn't have escaped. All Might had him, right? But then they saw that the sludge villain had a hostage. This hostage, they didn't know who this was, but all they could see was a tuft of pink hair that looked oddly like Izuku's. They both immediately rushed out to help. Izuku using his omniforce powers to summon a flaming blade, while Katsumi pulled out one of her weapons, which was given to her. Izuku didn't really ask for a weapon; he just kind of made his, but Katsumi did, and her weapon was actually designed to, once it hit something, it would cause a delayed explosion later. And it would be more powerful if she was in the middle of a rage boost mode, which she could trigger at any time. When they got her out, they brought her to safety. And All Might had witnessed this, as he had actually had to go back to look for it, and he arrived right as soon as he saw both of them save the girl. Now, the heroes, of course, tried to reprimand both of them for using their quirk and putting themselves in danger, but both Katsumi and Izuku, having been influenced by the Gladiator Masters, glared at them and said, "You guys weren't doing anything. You were worried about being in the spotlight or having the right quirk for it. It doesn't matter what quirk you have. You need to get out there and save somebody. That's what it means to be a hero. Besides, we didn't use our quirks. We used our omniforce abilities." All the pro heroes shut up at this, because if these kids had omniforce, the omniforce within them, then that meant that they were very much stronger than all of them put together. And as All Might noticed this, he wanted to go out there and talk to them, but he was afraid of being ambushed by the reporters. Eventually, Izuku and Katsumi, along with their new friend Mina Ashido, were in the park. And Mina, right off the bat, was happy at the fact that both of them had horns, and so did she. Yes, I know in both of these pictures I don't have... well, not just this one. I forgot to draw Izuku's horns, okay? I know I did, and I'm sorry about that. Imagine his horns like Ignitix. Go back and look at go back in the video a bit and look at his picture and you'll see him. Anyway, they noticed a symbol on Mina's outfit. Or it looked like a symbol, at least. The symbol had a skull, a melting skull with crossbones around it. And they had already known that the way Speed Fury had found his team was in a similar fashion, that they all wore a symbol of what their powers were, if they had a connection to the Omniforce. And that meant this girl did. And while they wanted to talk to her and tell her about it, they decided to hold off because somebody had arrived. "I am here!" And that's where we're going to end it for now. If you guys enjoyed the story, like and subscribe. I will see you for the next part.